Tarnished Sock Podcast. Check it out. The Tarnished Sock Experience. Coming by day, Tarnished Sock Podcast by night, all day. All right, welcome in everyone to the Ye Ol' Frostman's first podcast. And today we have the one, the only, Ziostorm with us here today, dude. Welcome in, Zio.
Yep, thank you for having me, bro.
Dude, it's my pleasure, dude. And obviously we have so much to talk about here. We have the story trailer that just dropped, yesterday, and dude, like, what was your takeaway from that? What was your overall just kind of like reaction and impressions to that, dude? Because I'm so pumped.
So I was going in preparing to like not understand anything, as we typically do with new trailers.
Right.
Software is so good at like misdirection. So we'll think we're like going one way and then they'll completely sidetrack us. But I was a little bit surprised at how coherent it was in context of what we already knew.
Yeah,
like America's history, the land of shadow, all that stuff.
Right.
We're kind of able to like digest, at least for the most part, what the general idea of it was. And so I was glad about that.
Yeah, no, and I definitely echo those sentiments as well, dude, because like, just the basis of everything, like, dude, I mean, like my jaw was on the floor with that first opening, like, scene with America and potentially her rise to power and all of that, like potentially intaking the power of the greater will, which is what I interpreted that to be. But obviously everything is open to interpretation, and we're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall at this point and seeing what sticks. But yeah, no, like and another thing that stands out, just kind of playing off what you already said, is the later on in the trailer we kind of almost got like a direct almost confirmation of Mikola being directly aligned with Saint Trina, or as close of a guarantee as we can potentially get, from like an official piece of media that is put out there. I thought that scene was very, very interesting as well.
All the shots were just like so beautiful too.
Yeah,
I was
dude.
blown away at the cinematography. Like literally you can pause it at any time.
Yeah.
And you've got this beautiful kind of like painting.
It's so insane, dude. And that's very much like the game itself. I can't tell you how many screenshots that I took, on my first playthrough alone, just because every single shot, well, even playing through the game is very much like that as well. And dude, like I couldn't help myself but like want like a full like Elden Ring style like animated movie or something like that, in that very similar style to the story trailers, because it's just like, it's so immaculate, dude. Like whoever they contracted out, exactly.
I can't remember the name of the company, but dude, they killed it, man.
Yeah, dude, with every single one.
Story trailer, but this one was so much better to me.
Yes.
Like the composition of the shots.
Yeah,
the colors and
yeah.
everything.
Well, and obviously, that definitely plays into that too, where the first one is what it is. You're kind of trying to figure out what this company actually wants from you, you know what I mean? And obviously, using the same company, they had a lot of time to be like, okay, this is what From Software digs, this is their style, and they really, really hit it right on the nail this time, I
would love to see like the storyboards and everything if that ever comes out, because some of those shots, man, they had just inspiration from like old Renaissance paintings and that kind of thing.
Yes, dude, without a doubt, dude. So yeah, I cannot sing this trailer's praises enough, man. But I don't know, dude, if you don't mind, I'm a huge lore nerd, dude. So what is your overall like kind of takeaway from what we see throughout the trailer, right? Because I'm very curious.
Okay, so I have a few different directions about what I interpret that initial part to be, because I made my video and I was kind of thinking, okay, it's like America forming the first rune.
Yes.
And then forming the Elden Ring after that.
Yep.
But a lot of people have come out and said like maybe that's part of it, but also that when it talks about kind of the seduction, the betrayal.
Yeah, dude.
It's talking about the greater will possibly seducing America to summon in the Elden Beast and eventually become the host of the Elden Ring and all that.
Right. Yeah, you know, and that first sequence is so like grandiose, and there's so many different things at play there that could potentially be the case. But I think that's a very safe bet, you know, like what you just proposed, because it just like, man, the imagery, all of that, like you have the darkened like purple haze like outside the two, you know, like pillars of corpses, right? And then you have like in the center of it, you have like this transition to potentially a different realm entirely, where it's just completely gold. You know, I always thought that was really, really fascinating about it too, because it's that ritual to me really seems like that was the act that like created the realm of shadow effectively. Because I have a theory as to, I believe that, you know, like because there's that kind of like crater in the center of the map, you know what I mean, right? And a lot of things to me point towards that was once actually connected to the larger part of the Lands Between that we actually play through in the game as it stands currently, right? And I think that whatever America was doing right there was actually shrouding that entire piece of landmass with some sort of ritual, or, you know, whatever it may be, right? And also
So you think the Land of Shadow was in the center?
Yeah,
it's just veiled.
Yes, exactly. That's where I'm leaning towards personally. And obviously, you know, there's the imagery of, you know, like we saw in the gameplay trailer of Shadow of the Erdtree, the expansion, where, you know, you see the baldachins draped down, you know, over the Shadow Tree itself and all of that. And I just find that to be very fascinating, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but if you look at Marika's bedchamber, right, right before you fight Morgott, you know, and all of that, it's very fascinating that there's 6 baldachins that hang down from her bedchamber, and there's also that we can visually see in that overarching like big overview part when in the gameplay reveal trailer. There's also 6 baldachins that are draped over the Shadow Tree in the land too.
And
so
there's
like
also the Divine Towers
yes,
outlining.
Exactly, dude. Yeah, 6 Divine Towers, all of that, you know, like that's, and also once again, just another reinforcement factor towards that potentially being the case is the Mimic Veil item. Also, and in its item description, it's referred to as Marika's Mischief, right? And it's like, I wonder how it got that name. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
like, no, all of that is very, very fascinating to me. And tell me what you think about this, because I'm really starting to believe from everything that we've seen in the gameplay reveal and now the story trailer that it seems like we've almost been missing like the second half of the entirety of the story of the game, which
absolutely.
And that's absolutely wild, dude. Like,
well, let me put it a different way. Instead of missing the half, we've only gotten it from one point of view.
Right, exactly.
Perhaps.
That's a better way of framing it.
Elden Ring is like them conquering one civilization and then overriding a history to make them look like the bad guys.
Yes, dude.
I think it's the same thing going on here. Like one thing I was thinking about was the Crucible, specifically.
Yep.
And how the Land of Shadow is where she became a god and the Erdtree was born. Well, if the Crucible is the primordial form of the Erdtree, is the way they describe that not actually the case, with it being some sort of power or the state of the like law and world before the Erdtree took over?
Yes.
And then overriding it to say the primordial form of the Erdtree, to kind of describe it as having always been the Erdtree itself instead of something else that was taken.
Exactly, dude. Yeah, like all of that theming, dude, is just, and once again, it's very, very From Software, and it's also very George R. R. Martin, you know, too. And you see both of those inspirations on full display here, and I just, like, you, to your point, you know, like, I really like the way they're potentially framing this, with it being just that perspective shift, you know? It's like, oh, you've only seen it from what you've been told. Oh, the Golden Order is this, they pretend to be this, you know, like holy thing, right? And it's like, oh, goody goody two shoes kind of thing, right? And meanwhile, they're covering up the entirety of their extremely messed up past, you know? Like, that's, bro, it's absolutely brutal. And once again, you know, like the war that followed whatever America's doing in the opening parts of that that story trailer, you know, the Mesmer just absolutely massacring the powers that potentially were in power or were the natives, right, beforehand, before the Newman race potentially came to the Lands Between, aka what is now known as the Shadow Realm, right, the Realm of Shadow. I think that's really, really interesting too. Also, I wanted to point this out as well to kind of gauge your opinion on this. I don't know if you remember the scene in the gameplay reveal trailer of Shadow of the Erd Tree where it's got the red dancer NPC and they're fighting with the player character, and it's in that field of blue flowers and everything, which is absolutely gorgeous, like, my god. But that aside, in the background we can see structures that kind of look like the back of ships, right? Are you familiar with that theory? What is your take on that?
So this can kind of tie back into what you were saying about the theory of it being in the center of the map.
Yeah.
If you look on the map in the middle,
right,
and kind of out in the sea as well, there's a bunch of these galleons.
Yes,
on there.
dude, yes.
But when we actually go to the coast and the Lands Between, all we ever find are like little, you know, 1 to 3 passenger little canoes or something.
Yep.
Aside from that one in Radahn's arena, which is
right,
a big mystery of its own. But on the map, it looks like they're trading with Landell. It's kind of depicted in a way to where Landell could have had like a dock or a port,
right,
or something for trade and all that.
Yeah,
but we don't actually ever see that.
Right.
So perhaps those ships that we see there are crashed onto the land for whatever happened to the Land of Shadow after it was veiled and hidden away from the rest of the world.
Right. So yeah, dude, like I just, and a lot of my speculation hinges on that, honestly, because I love that idea so much. And we've heard multiple times, I believe, throughout the lore and item descriptions of the game that there's all of these factions that are referred to as coming from outside the Lands Between, you know, like, and whether or not that means, because I believe like House Murray, like, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this too, because it's been a long while since I've actually dived in directly to all of the lore, but I believe House Murray was one of those as such, right?
I don't think it's ever described as them having come from outside the land. It is for Tanith.
Okay. Oh, right.
In context of House Murray.
Okay.
But you can kind of infer.
Yeah.
They likely had a culture before the Golden Order.
Yes.
And that goes into a whole thing too with like their mask.
Yeah, I know, right?
In the DLC trailer.
Yeah. That's similar formatting. So it's like in relation to just Tanith then, because that is explicitly stated. That's always a big point of contention for me, because it's like when it comes to the speculation, because it's like, does that mean that Tanith was inhabiting the portion of the map that became the Realm of Shadow, and aka that's what they're meaning when they say that outside the quote-unquote Lands Between, right, was that she was potentially witness to a lot of that stuff that happened, but was able to escape beforehand? Before it was sected off?
Yeah, that's a good question, because
or
look at the person she chose to follow.
Exactly.
Somebody that is very clearly inspired by Mesmer, or at least has knowledge of it.
Yes, dude.
And is no stranger to kind of like the darker side of all of it.
So yeah, no, I really like that as a basis for speculation, because it's like, with all of those similarities, like you said, between Rykard and Mesmer and stuff like that, and like how the snakes became known as the enemy of the Erd Tree, right, in the first place, because it's like, obviously something happened and we're becoming privy to that now after watching the story trailer, potentially, as a large reason why snakes are defined as such, as a direct result of Mesmer. But yeah, no, like if Tanith was in that portion of the map before it got separated from the rest of the lands between and managed to escape before that happened and was not, as a result, trapped in that, then she would have known a lot of these things that happened in the past and would have potentially relayed a lot of that to Volcano Manor and Rykard himself, you know? And I really like that theory, honestly.
Well, if that is the case, then there's a lot of other things that come into question as well, because it's never really explained why is she protected by a Crucible Knight.
Exactly.
That's a big mystery too.
Yes, yep.
And then you also have to kind of wonder about the timeline, because Rykard theoretically wouldn't have been born during that time.
Right. Yeah, and that's
There's
fair
a lot of
too.
variables there.
Yeah, I know, dude. Like, and here's the thing, right? So now that you bring up the timeline, if you don't mind, we'll jump over to that, because that was always like the biggest difficulty with Elden Ring's story, right? Was trying to piece together, like, we have all of these events and everything, and we have very detailed just breakdowns effectively of who these characters are, what their intentions are, and all of that, which is very contrary to a lot of what From Software has done in the past of their previous games, you know? We have way more information on, like, so many different characters, like, so in depth in Elden Ring, right? But being that that's the case, I always found it extremely odd that it was so difficult to actually place where all of these different events and where all of these people rose to power. What was that timeline? And now, after watching the gameplay reveal trailer, and obviously even more so the story trailer for Shadow of the Erdtree, it kind of gave me a little bit of a better idea now, finding out that, this entire history happened potentially first before almost everything else that we know about in the game, because obviously this is explicitly stated by Miyazaki himself in an interview, that the DLC itself is going to be exploring Marika's rise to power, and that is, you know, very, very much a core theme of Shadow of the Erdtree itself. And so that's where my mind is at on that. I'm taking a lot of the events that we're going to be seeing in Shadow of the Erdtree, the expansion, to be as happened first, but obviously not when we're going to, you know, like when the Tarnished ourselves are actually going there, because that's after all of the events have happened.
We're traveling.
Yeah, we're going to be uncovering the history of that, which potentially came first before the rest of the base game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then but that raises so many questions, right? Because you have Mesmer. He very clearly looks like a child of Radagon.
Yes.
But if you're looking at it from a literal perspective, then Radagon didn't come until way later down the timeline.
Right. Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So now we have to wonder, okay, is this like kind of confirmation that Radagon was always there?
Yeah, exactly. Or was a separate entity.
Well, how does Mikola play into all this? How does he know that history? Nobody else does.
Yep.
You know, there's so many new questions to ask.
Yeah, dude, and that's so exciting. Because like and this has been, I guess, a theory that I've had for a while now. But with the gameplay reveal trailer, I had speculated that potentially that Marika and Radagon were separate individuals at the start. It seems like that's the case now, but it's also so up in the air. But just kind of exploring that possibility, right? If they were separate individuals at the start, I think that, and where like Radagon's origins would have potentially came from, because obviously you have, you know, the misbegotten and stuff like that being referred to as, like, when you data mine the game, they're referred to as children of Radagon, right? And they show an overwhelming amount of manifestations of the Crucible itself, you know? And
Yeah.
obviously you have the Leonine
There's a whole
Misbegotten.
other rabbit hole right there.
Yeah, exactly, right. So you have like the Leonine Misbegotten, which are the ones that actually have the telltale sign, you know, similarity, that being the red hair, right? And so if you kind of use that as a baseline, and that's directly associated with the Crucible, red hair, potentially, right? You could use that as a launch point too, but what else do we know of that has red hair that's been around for a very long time too? And that is the Giants, in my mind, right? And obviously they were a huge player in terms of like power scaling and overall like power level, as opposed to everything else that existed in the lands between, even prior to, you know, like America doing what she did to sect off that piece, becoming the Realm of Shadow, of course. I think it's interesting because maybe the Giants were directly as a result or a direct manifestation of the Crucible as well. I'm not entirely sure on that, but what do you think about that?
Well, the further back you go in the theoretical timeline, the closer you get to the Crucible.
Exactly.
And, you know, we have the Giants, the fire Giants with the red hair.
Yeah.
And then you can also see in the DLC trailer that Mesmer's army, the big wicker men, have heads of fire giants
Yep.
around their waist. So they tie into that somehow.
Yes.
And then you've got all the aspects of the Crucible present in the so-called natives of the Land of Shadow.
Yep.
And if the further back you go, we can trace it all the way to the Crucible being like, I'm kind of thinking that the Land of Shadow is closest to the Crucible.
I would
both like power and location, if it even is like a physical place.
Right. Yep.
And that may be the power that America stole, like I was saying earlier. But if Radagon himself has ties to it through, like, as we can see with the Misbegotten, then maybe whenever she claimed that power, Radagon, in a sense, like awoke. Something that I heard people discuss yesterday was in relation to Mikola and Saint Trina. Whenever in the trailer it shows that shot, they say like abandon his fate as well.
Yeah, even his fate.
Seemingly implying that Saint Trina was what Mikola was fated to be.
Right.
And so you can kind of play with the idea that once America claimed this power, or even maybe beforehand, Radagon might have been that same thing where Radagon was America's ultimate fate. And perhaps she did something to circumvent that, to, you know, have that form like work under her. Because we can see a disagreement there with how Radagon reforms the Elden Ring, but Marika shatters it.
Exactly. Yes.
So there's kind of a dichotomy between
the two. There is, very much so. Yeah, and like that's it's so fascinating because I do really like that idea too, you know, that her potentially stealing that power from the primordial crucible of life, if that was a deep rooted, you know, like you said, ultimate form, you know, that was her fate as a result of being so, you know, that lust for power, you know, that she didn't potentially know what she was getting herself into. And ultimately that allowed the greater will also to interweave and take over her vessel potentially and make her do things that she potentially would never do, right, as well. So like there's that entire aspect to it as well, which is absolutely insane, you know, where it's like potentially, because like that was always a big point of contention in the base game too, as to what Marika's true intentions were, you know, for her actions that she did throughout the game. Like,
so
you know,
go
for it. Yeah.
Like I was saying, if Radagon is the ultimate fate of what Marika's supposed to be, is when we find Radagon in the base game, is that ultimate fate having manifested? Because there is no sentient Marika in the base game.
Exactly.
It's all like a thing of the past.
Yeah, it's a husk
about her through echoes. What we end up finding is just a broken statue of her. So did that fate ultimately come to fruition? And that's when we find Radagon and try to like kind of I don't know, maybe reverse it and bring her back or something.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Because obviously, you know, you can just straight up see the Elden Beast even like inhabiting the husk of Radagon's body too.
Yeah.
Like even when you're fighting Radagon himself, you know, it's got the gold and like the crack in his eye or whatever, right? Because half of his
He's
face
also
is
got that
gone.
kind of like oily arm.
Yeah, exactly, and that's that shadow, and it's the black and gold, which also are very core themes in the DLC proper as well. Because you know, even in the opening part, I believe, you know, that voice, whoever that ends up being that's narrating, not quite sure who it is right now, right? But can always speculate as to that. But yeah, no, the I forget exactly what it says, right? It's like
The birth of gold and also shadow.
yes, exactly, simultaneously, and I think that's it definitely points towards that referring to the Greater Will or the Elden Beast, in my opinion.
Well, it's got the Elden Beast soundtrack playing right there as well.
Right, exactly, dude, and I think that's very, very intentional, you know.
Well, okay, so another theory I had brought up.
Yeah.
That I might have mentioned this earlier, I'm not sure. When she's kind of holding those strands up, she gets hit with like a blast of wind.
Yep.
Was that maybe like the meteorite impacting at that same time?
Right, exactly, dude. Yeah, because that whole thing too, dude. Like from the, do we know like where is that explicitly talked about? Like the meteorite is in the base game.
Elden Stars.
It is okay.
Yeah.
I see, and that's extremely fascinating. That it's the Elden Stars incantation too, which is
It says
straight
the
up
Greater Will
associated.
sent down a meteorite that would become the Elden Beast.
So yeah, that definitely makes sense, and obviously, you know, the Elden Beast being effectively a space parasite, right, with, you know, taking over what looks to be the original Great Tree in the Lands Between, right? Because I believe all of the Great Tree references got purged from the base game, right? That was a network test thing.
Yeah,
right.
There's clearly something going on.
And yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on that front too, because obviously, you know, when you walk up to the arena where you fight Godfrey and Morgott both respectively, you know, you see the original like bark, you know, in a small portion, you know, right above the doorway that leads inside of the Erd Tree. And you know, once again, you know, all of the stuff with the Erd Tree burial and all of that, the tree sapping all of the strength and grace.
In that opening scene of the story trailer, all those bodies becoming the tree.
Yep, exactly.
You know, because we look at the roots, and the bodies that are placed in the roots become roots themselves. They're turning into the tree.
Yes, dude, exactly. And whether or not that is like what we're seeing right there is potentially the foundations of the Shadow Tree, or it's the foundation and the start of the Erd Tree itself. I'm not entirely sure. I'm more inclined to lean on it's the start and foundation of the Shadow Tree. I think that definitely fits a little bit more.
What makes you think that?
Just because, like, it, once again, it's shrouded. Well, here, I'll take this first. So I think there's a lot of similarities, and this obviously when we got the first promotional image for Shadow of the Erd Tree, you know, there was a lot of speculation as to the similarities with the helix design, you know, of the Shadow Tree itself, and the similarities between that and the Halig Tree. So that's interesting, first and foremost, right? I just wanted to lay that groundwork first. And we also know that Mikola, when he embeds himself in the base of the Halig Tree, what does he do? He feeds it his own blood, which is very interesting too, considering if the tree that we're seeing in that opening, well, if it is a tree at all, or if it's just some sort of like ungodly, weird flesh portal made of bodies, who knows? I mean, that's probably what it started out as, but you know, obviously it maybe progressed into the Shadow Tree itself. But I think that's a very interesting parallel, considering the double helix design of the Halig Tree itself, and what it feeds and thrives off of is the blood of a very powerful individual, you know, right above the doorway that leads inside of the Erd Tree. And you know, once again, you know, all of the stuff with the Erd Tree burial and all of that, the tree sapping all of the strength and grace. You know, aka an Imperium, demigod. And the fact that we're seeing so much blood and gore and corpses and everything, and whatever America is pulling those hair strands out of at the start, or like energy of some sort, they could end up being, two sides of the same coin. They could end up being the same thing. It starts to become very interesting, and this is where I have a pretty big jump here, but you let me know if you think I'm too off base with that, right? Now that we've established that Miquella was, feeding his blood to grow his Halig tree, I have a theory that the fact that Miquella's curse being the eternal youth and all of that, right? I think that could potentially end up being a red herring, and that could be that Miquella ends up being the eldest, the firstborn son of Marika and Radagon, and potentially, and this is even I'll go on record as saying this is quite a jump, right? But Marika pulls out something from, and people have agreed that it looks like a swaddling cloth, right? At the start, semi-similar, right? And obviously that would directly associate it with a child or baby of some kind. And the fact that she pulls out what looks to be golden hair strands or golden energy of some sort, who do we know that has golden locks and golden strands and also radiates himself with golden energy, like we see at the end of the gameplay reveal trailer, right? Where Miquella holds his hand up, and it's a very, very similar effect too. Granted, it's a CGI trailer this time, so it looks a little bit different, but it's very, very similar overall. I think that potentially the thing that she's ripping that energy from could potentially be Miquella in his infantile state. And also, one thing that I will point out is that if Miquella was cursed with eternal youth, right? How would he have gotten to the point where, we see him in like the opening slideshow of Elden Ring in the first place, right? He looks like a 7-8-year-old kid, right? When Mohg has him in his arm, right? How would he have gotten aged to that point if he's not aging at all? And we know from Mohg too, Mohg is sapping his blood, his life essence away from him. And the husk that we see in the cocoon is extremely aged and old and decrepit, right? So going off of that basis, as to what we see in the opening of the story trailer, I think that Miquella only ages when his blood or power is being taken from him in some capacity or another, okay? So, and once again, to reinforce this theory a little bit more, Marika, based on all of what we know about her in the base game, she seems to use anybody to her own ends as much as she can possibly take from them, and then she throws them to the wayside, right? And that this would also fall under that very same ideology too. So that is my overall crackpot theory for who that could potentially be. I'm just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks for the most part.
Well, I think you've got a lot there.
Yeah,
there's some very interesting. That would answer the question that we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's like, how did Miquella know?
Yes, exactly, dude.
Now, a few things that I would say to kind of challenge that.
Yeah, by all means.
One thing that I can't really get out of my mind is in that opening shot, whenever all those bodies are stacked up. Somebody sent me a picture overlaying the entrance of the Erd Tree with that, and it fit pretty closely, like past the throne when you go up the stairs inside where the bark changes.
Yep.
It fit pretty 1-to-1, but
you're saying the actual like the coloration when you enter the gold mist and all of that?
No,
or just the doorway itself.
Just the doorway.
Okay, yeah, and that does seem similar in scale. Yeah, that's valid.
Another thing too, how do you factor in Melania to that? because they're twins, right?
That is fair. And obviously they share, you know, that link, right, where they both got cursed in some way, shape, or form or another.
Yeah.
One thing that I will say on that front is I always find it weird that, granted, we don't know, like, once again, the timeline is so difficult, right, in the base game when we're actually traversing the lands between as the Tarnished, because we come back way later after all of this shit is, you know, has unfolded, the war, all of that stuff, right, in the Long March and everything, amidst the remnants of the Shattering War in general. I do, because, like, you factor in the Elfale and all of that, you know, where the Halig tree, you know, ended up being set up, all of that potentially came much later on, I would imagine, too, in the grand scheme of things, right? And then Moog kidnapping him, otherwise the Halig tree would have flourished, all of that. And Melania obviously being Miquella's protector, all of that, the Blade of Miquella, after all. I don't see any conflicting evidence that both of them couldn't have been born within the Realm of Shadow too, or before it became the Realm of Shadow, like shortly after she arrived there too. But once again, that would also conflict with the idea that Marika accepting the power from the Greater Will, if that's what we're seeing, awakens that latent power of the Crucible of Life, and that becomes the intertwining and the linking of, you know, Radagon and her, right? But I guess go on. Yeah,
if that kind of goes back to, you know, Radagon always being present within Marika,
right?
And the thing with Melania is, like, we don't have much about her,
no,
like, prior to, you know, being the leader in general that she is. There's a big missing gap to where,
yeah, dude,
like, the allegiance of all the demigods and
right,
the before the Shattering War popped off, pretty much all that's just gone. And so there's so many possibilities to where, while we may just, like, look at it and be like, yeah, okay, well, she wasn't always around.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what do we really base that on? You know?
I know exactly, dude. See, and that's really it, right? Like, and that kind of points to what I was saying earlier with, we have so much on so many different characters, like their ambitions, their intentions, all of that stuff, right? And we have like with certain quest lines and things like that, and just the overall timeline of what certain individuals throughout the story did. For every one of those that is insanely complex and detailed, and we have so much on, there's like 2 or 3 other characters that, like Melania, to your point, that it's just like, what were you doing, dude? You know what I mean? It's like, what? So, yeah, and you're right, you know, like that did slip my mind when I was talking about this theory with my brother. Yeah, I forget that they're referred to as the twin prodigies, right? Yeah, so Miquella and Melania, respectively. So, and obviously
going... Think about it, too.
Yeah, go on, yeah.
Since they are the children of, you know, the Marika Radagon joint.
Yes.
Melania embodies those aspects of Radagon.
Right.
With, like, the warlord, the red hair, all that stuff.
Yep.
While Miquella has this godhood of... that is reminiscent of Marika.
Right.
And so there seems to be also kind of like how we've only seen one half of the story in the Lands Between and the Land of Shadow. We've only gotten one half of the story pertaining to Miquella as well.
Yes, dude.
There's
exactly
some other stuff going. He's playing some 4D chess somehow.
Yes.
With a whole nother plot.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and I think... Well, I guess we'll come back to the idea that Radagon, the idea that Radagon was potentially a separate individual that helped Marika along her path and rise to power, because I really like that theory as well. But I did want to kind of segue to, and of course, like I said, we'll come back to that later. But the similarities with Mikola and being a just let me know if you think I'm off base with this, because everybody, especially in the base game, they're like, we hear just only exclusively like good things about Mikola as a character throughout the story, right? Like, as far as we know, a lot of his, like pretty much every single one of his intentions are pure, right? And that's why it's so off-putting to us as From Software fans, because it's like, where's the catch here, dude? You know what I mean? Like, you've never done this before.
Well,
what's the difference now,
bro?
Yeah, exactly, dude. You got it. So there's always that avenue that Mikola could, just and once again, that's the biggest reinforcing factor to him having like this really dark side, is that he has the ability to manipulate people, right, and all of that, to compel affection and love. And that is obviously a very, very like weird and messed up thing, if used with malintent.
Well, even the way it's like framed, he says there's nothing more terrifying.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Yes.
Melania describes him as the most fearsome Empyrean.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Saint Trina's torch, which depicts Saint Trina in a unnerving way. It's clearly pointing to a dark side, like you said.
Yeah, dude. And whether or not that dark side, the fate, as it's referred to as, being that shot of what we perceive to be as Saint Trina, if Saint Trina had like malintent, and Trina was the one that used that ability with those really malicious intentions, right? That is absolutely terrifying. And having manipulation over sleep too, as well, and dreams, like good God, dude, that's like the triple whammy, right? But putting that aside, right, if Mikola is actually the first character that I can think of, going back to like every single one of From Software's previous games and the characters that they've written, if this is the first character that From Software has explored as being just this holistically good character, I find that to be very, very interesting too, right? And also, same here, right? And this is where I kind of bring up like the parallels between, I guess before I go into that, I should establish this. Pretty much every character that is, I guess, associated with Mikola in some capacity, they're always using Mikola. That's like the way it seems, you know what I mean? They're like exploiting him for their own ends, right? And
in what way?
Like, obviously you have Moog, right? They're using that compassionate nature, like the things that Mikola does for his sister Melania, like obviously a very, very compassionate individual, and as far as we know from like a lot of events in the base game, he seems to be holistically good, right? creating the Mikola's needle, or the unalloyed gold needle to stop the rot spread, things like that, right? And also, now that groundwork has kind of been laid out, I think it's very interesting because there's a lot of parallels between Jesus and Mikola. I think, because once again, Jesus was a carpenter, craftsman. Mikola is a craftsman, very handy in that way, crafting the Mikola needles, being able to forge the unalloyed gold, all of those things, right? And then obviously just being this holistically good character that, once again, if you know the story of Jesus, didn't fucking matter. Everybody was like, fuck you, dude, nailing you to a crucifix. You're a fucking witch, effectively. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And that, honestly, those themes kind of coming full circle to in the base game, where obviously Moog being the primary example of that, where he's just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna, even though this fucking dude is this great, grandiose human being, I'm just still going to exploit that. You know what I mean?
And then he disappears. theoretically dies will have a rebirth.
Yep,
Has all
exactly.
the followers waiting on his second coming, all that.
Yep, you got it, dude. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of parallels there, and I think if once again, if Mikola doesn't have like a dark side turn, you know, or something like that, I really like that parallel overall, because once again, that's not really a character arc that they've really ever explored in the past. And once again, what that ends up culminating into in the events of Shadow of the Erdtree, I think that's super fascinating. And once again, to reinforce the idea that I don't necessarily think that there will be a turn of Mikola, is because in the story trailer it kind of reinforces that by divesting his power, you know, his golden flesh, and even his fate, right? And I think that's potentially, like, what that's saying is that he was fated to ultimately become Saint Trina all of the time, potentially, later on down the line, just much the same as potentially Marika and Radagon's situation, right? Because we also know that from Melania, too, that she, even as a child, was intermingled with a fucking outer god, right? The outer god of Scarlet Rot. And also that kind of points towards the fact that, like you said earlier, that Melania was more embodiments of Radagon, the side of Radagon, and Mikola was more associated with the side of Marika, right? And Marika has, you know, there's this duality between Marika and Radagon, and obviously there's that duality between Mikola and Saint Trina too, right? And it's like that power was bestowed again, right, through birthing a child. And I also think that oh shit, I might have just lost my train of thought there.
Let me kind of build off that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So if that is the case, and Mikola is, you know, not going to have this evil turning point or some malicious what's it called? Like alternate intentions behind what he's doing.
Yep.
One angle that From Software always goes at too is like necessary evil, right? So Dark Souls 1, we're destroying the world.
Yep.
It's the necessary evil, even though the intentions of the people we're killing may not have been bad.
Yep.
We could potentially tackle that angle with Mikola as well.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
We ultimately have to have a fight with him, even though he's not doing anything bad. We're just doing something that has to be done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and like you said,
another thing I was kind of thinking is like, if Saint Trina was cast away from Mikola, is that going to ultimately be like the parallel evil form of him?
Yeah,
have to go and fight as well.
That would be very cool, dude. Genuinely. And see, on that note, you know, and once again, the line from the trailer keeps ringing back in my mind of, you know, him divesting his golden flesh, all of that, even his fate, and potentially, because we know obviously that Radahn was halting the fate, you know, of pretty much every single demigod in the base game, you know, and that was putting a direct halt on Ranni, as well as Mikola trying to bring about the eclipse as well too, you know. So Radahn was halting that, and I think the fact that he was even able to divest himself of the fates, and that would actually play directly into what Miyazaki has stated in an interview as to why Radahn needs to be killed supplementally too, upon entering the DLC, because that is what's allowing Mikola to actually free himself of his fate.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't considered.
I just thought of that on the spot. That makes a lot of sense, actually. But yeah, like you said, if that manifestation carries over and follows Mikola, even in his pure form, but creates effectively a separate entity and splits them, that is a really, really cool and fascinating idea.
That would be. Maybe we have to like halt that fate once and for all.
Yes, exactly.
Fighting the alter ego.
And if that.
So let me ask you this too.
Yep.
Do you think that? Well, first off, why would Mikola need to divest himself of all of that in order to go to the Land of Shadow? And do you think he might have used Moog as like the means of divesting?
I do have a theory on that as to, because, well, and that's been speculated for a long time, right? That Mikola was pulling the strings, telling Moog to, hey, I sent my sister away to go and fight Radahn. I'm free for the taking. Because Moog is a power, Moog is a power-hungry individual, and with Mikola, with his ends that he wanted to accomplish, I think that would pretty much fall in line, I think. But even beyond that, too, like, what do you think about the idea that Mikola, Melina, and Ronnie are all in cahoots with one another?
I've been wanting to make a video about that for so long. I just don't know how to like tie it all together.
Yeah, ultimately.
It definitely seems like they are, at least to some degree.
Yeah, I agree.
Obviously, Ronnie using the sleep mist, the Torrent's former master stuff.
Yep.
The butterfly theory.
Yep.
What else?
Well,
Godwin potentially being some kind of martyr for a higher purpose.
Yep, exactly.
And there's again so much more going on behind the scenes that we don't have the context.
Yes, dude, very much so.
The Night of the Black Knives wasn't, just a unintentional murder for no reason.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
Dude. You have to be pretty privy to, things that have been kept on the down low for a very long time to be able to orchestrate something like that. And that's why I think that Marika ultimately was, especially after watching this trailer, I'm really, really starting to believe that Marika was behind, like, taking Ronnie under her wing and educating her on all of this past history of the land, because there's so much correlation between, obviously, Marika being a Newman and then the Black Knife Assassins also being Newman, using Marika's mischief, the concealing veil, the thing that she shrouded the entirety of the fucking Shadowlands with. Like, there's a lot there. And obviously, too, if, once again, going back to that first scene in the story trailer, if Marika had that lust for power, and was potentially, like the line, the seduction and betrayal, right? If that is indeed referring to the greater will doing that to her, that is very, very fascinating and plays directly into this as well, because Marika obviously had that thirst for power once again. She overstepped and didn't realize what she was getting herself into by accepting this, and what this would potentially do to her. And if that was the direct result of Radagon becoming effectively a latent, awakened personality as a result of her accepting the power of the greater will within her own essence and being. And I think that, once again, that duality, and that being a core theme all throughout the Elden Ring storyline, it was a constant battle and fight for control between Marika and, if the greater will's actual physical manifestation within the realm that we all inhabit, right? The Lands Between and the Realm of Shadow together. If that is Radagon, if he is the physical manifestation of that, and it's, closely linked with the Elden Beast itself, I think that the Elden Beast and the Greater Will, of course, were constantly vying for power and potentially overtook Marika, and we pretty much know that that's the case from what you mentioned earlier with when we encounter Marika, crucified, held up by the rune arc and everything inside of the Erd Tree proper. I think that ultimately the Greater Will was making a lot of decisions through Marika that she would have never wanted to do in the first place. And I think that maybe by Marika gaining enough strength and control to deal that fatal blow to the Elden Beast itself by shattering the Elden Ring, right? And that's why we see that wound on the stomach of the Elden Beast, right, when we fight it, and that's the only reason we're able to even kill it. I think that Marika worked up all of her strength to be able to do that one thing alongside of potentially educating Ronnie on all of these things, orchestrating it, and being like, see, and here's the big point of contention with it, but I think this follows along with this theory. Yeah, for sure. I think this aligns with the theory, though, is that Marika would never have wanted, potentially, to kill her firstborn son, right? Godwin, quote unquote. We don't know if that was truly her firstborn son, right?
Does it say firstborn or just the first to die?
I don't rightly recall. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is the first to die. Maybe it's never explicitly stated that. Well, it is I guess it's the firstborn with her and Godfrey, I guess, right? Because I think that's
well, I think
true,
that's just
right?
mainly inferred.
Okay, right, okay. But regardless of that, her most beloved son, I guess, is a better way of putting it, because clearly she loved and cared for Godwin, I think, but
yeah, she was driven to the brink.
Exactly.
Oh.
And it could have potentially, if Marika was the one orchestrating everything behind the Night of the Black Knives and all of that, because there's a lot of supporting evidence, but of course it could end up, being something else entirely, of course, as is always the case with these games. But I think it could have potentially been a compassionate killing, because Godwin was also, it's important to keep in mind that Godwin was next in line as well, to be the next Elden Lord too. And it's like Marika being potentially taken over almost fully by this fucking creature, the space parasite, right? The greater will, the outer god. She was like, I would never wish this fate upon my son. You know what I mean? So it was a compassionate killing based on that principle, right? And then
I think we may be giving her too much compassion here.
That's true. That's true.
Clearly, the way we represented of her history, that I don't think she gave too much cares for all of that.
Yeah. And
a few
that's
points of contention. Real
quick.
quick.
Yeah, for sure. Please do.
Clearly, the Rune of Death being stolen, Malekith saw that as a failure of Queen Marika.
Yes.
Or of himself to Queen Marika.
Right. Yep.
Second, where does the Finger Slayer blade come from? Who is that made out of? And what was the high treason of the Nox?
Exactly.
She was involved in all that.
Right.
There was one other thing I was going to say, but I'm forgetting it.
Okay. So, I guess I'll play off that while you think.
Yeah.
So that whole thing, I'm glad you brought that up too, with the Finger Slayer blade and all of that, because that is so fascinating, dude. That's like one of the biggest fascinating points about Elden Ring's lore, is that there's this underground civilization, multiple of them, that were advancing at a similar rate and were privy to things that people on the civilization on the surface were not, right? And like how all of that plays together is so fascinating baseline. But
dude, that whole part of the lore is so strange to me.
I know.
What to make of it.
Yeah. And so here's the thing, right? I think, just kind of going down that path more so, if I'm correct on the speculation that what became the Realm of Shadow was actually a holistic piece of the overall Lands Between and was ripped away and segregated from it, I think that potentially, because we see, here's the other part of it too, dude, is that in the gameplay reveal trailer, we see what seems to be like that individual in that carrion-based architecture building with like the glintstone lamps and stuff like that. And then it looks to be, and we know that obviously the Carrion family and all of that has direct ties with the underground too, like the Sellians, all of that, the immigrated, like the other ones founded the academy and all of that. As far as I know, unless I'm jumping, and that's from pre-release lore.
Yeah,
from
well,
the
there's a
network
lot of
test.
pre-release lore I want to bring up, but I'm hesitating.
Okay. No, dude, do it, dude, because like all of that could
okay.
potentially come up in the DLC.
You remember that map that got leaked
Yes,
way
yes,
back
dude.
in the day?
Yes.
The whole center of the map was a big impact.
Exactly, dude. Yes.
I almost wonder if like the whole like Eternal Cities and all that, whenever the base game was made, were what was originally written as the Land of Shadow. Because in order for the Nox and all that to be present, you have to take lines like, okay, the Black Knife Assassins were from outside the lands between.
Exactly.
Okay, so are we talking about the Eternal Cities being outside the lands between?
Yeah, exactly.
Or is there something else going on here?
Right. Dude, I'm so glad you brought that up, man, because that, like, I'm so fascinated by that. And I like that you prompted that, because I was going to bring that up at a certain point throughout the podcast too, that it, like, a lot of the pre-release story was, a lot of it was largely like entirely changed, and like that could just be the case, don't get me wrong, that, and we know that From Software, you know, they go through multiple iterations of the game, you know, and then, you know, making it work later on down the line.
Yeah, but a lot of this lore was changed like last minute, bro. We got like
exactly
1.0 is so different.
Yes, dude. So to your point on that, the fact that it's so different with the pre-release stuff and even the version 1.0 stuff, like, it points towards that there was a drastic shift, that From Software was potentially, they were like, okay, there's too much here that we're gonna have to fit into just the base game alone. And I think that's why they're calling this an expansion, because once again, to our point, it quite literally is the second half of the story that they didn't have enough time to tell effectively, you know what I mean? Because it's like,
there's a lot of stuff in 1.0 that also pertains to like Mikola.
Yes,
and his
dude.
relation to the Carians.
Exactly.
Like, the 1.0 what's her name? Loretta lore.
Talks about, dude, like, so fascinating.
Mikola, Loretta being Radagon's gift to Mikola as a guardian for something, and then because there's a big chunk too that with what we were talking about earlier, the plot of potentially Melina, Ronnie, and Mikola all being cohorts.
Yes.
You can play off of a potential relation of Mikola and the Carians too.
Yes, and very much so.
It works pretty well in the 1.0 lore, but not so much in the base game.
Right. So like, and once again, you know, this is, it starts making a lot of sense too, why all of the stuff was restructured, like under this pretense, you know, like the lens that we're looking at it through now, with everything that we've seen from the DLCs, the DLC trailer rather, and the story trailer respectively. It's like, wow, all of these themes that were explicitly like cut from the base game, like a lot of the cut content too is directly implanted into the DLCs too, not only in theming but just actual like items and shit like that too, right? So it's, I really think that there's something to this. I don't think that we're just, you know, like just completely off base with this, but
I agree 100%.
Yeah, as to how all of these pieces actually fit together, it's so difficult. We
also have to consider too is like what we're reading now.
Yeah,
like I was mentioning with the Crucible at the beginning, is what we're reading now a rewriting of history? Like in the item description and everything, are we only seeing this?
Dude, I love that idea, dude.
We've been getting for a while.
Oh my god!
I don't want it to be the case because there's so much that we have to just like, okay,
right?
We just scrap everything we knew for the past 2 years, or.
But at the same time, and once again, like it's not necessarily that way, because it's, well, and here's the thing that's at the forefront of my mind right now is that George R.R. Martin has also written books like that from the position of like 2 or 3 different maesters or whatever, which are the historians of the Game of Thrones world, and that's, oh man, because it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all false, it's just under somebody's jaded perception, you know what I mean? It's through their own experience of how they interpreted the events that occurred. And like, if you look at it through that lens, I think that's really, really cool, especially based on obviously, from what we know, obscuring all of these extremely messed up acts that happened way, way back, right? So, man, I really like that idea, dude. And just to kind of play off your point even more, I don't think that, and once again, just to kind of reinforce that, I don't necessarily think that we throw everything away. It's just that, and through that, getting the lore told through a certain perspective, it gives you access to things that you wouldn't normally have come across without two sides of the same story, right? Because I think telling a story via that method, I think gives you so much deeper of an understanding, right? Instead of it just being like
examples of that, like actually happening.
Yes,
Such
exactly.
as a lot of things pertaining to the giants,
right?
Or, like the Zamor warriors, for example.
Exactly. Yes.
You know, they're presented as heroes of the war against the giants, but we find them locked in jails and their town destroyed. And
yeah,
you know, it's like, okay, the game is very clearly telling you that this was overwritten.
yes,
and what
dude.
we're seeing is an angle that is no longer the case. Again, the Colosseums as well.
Yes,
like
dude.
that.
Very, very much so.
And
yeah.
so I think with the DLC, we're gonna get that alternate perspective on a lot of things that we otherwise wouldn't question right now.
Yes, dude. Yes. See, and because there's so much detail, and I guess before I go into that, I gotta sing Elden Ring's praises, dude. You know, the team at From Software, Miyazaki himself, and George R. R. Martin for this story, dude. Because,
oh yeah,
like I'm
bro, what other game, man?
I know, dude.
I was talking like this.
Exactly, bro. Exactly. That's 100% my point, man. Like, I just appreciate that so much. Not only the fact that George R. R. Martin is such an excellent fantasy writer, right? Like, his own spin and how he does things too, but how From Software has done their storytelling in the past, you know, being very open-ended and stuff like that. And George R. R. Martin is extreme detail, you know what I mean? Very rarely leaves things, you know, like ambiguous or open to interpretation unless he intends that first and foremost from the get-go, right? And the way that Miyazaki and the team were able to take that impetus that George R. R. Martin provided the team and mesh it together in this way is just such a masterclass, man. Like they
is, man. I think they did it perfectly because, like, with old From Software games like Dark Souls, I was involved, like I was into the lore, but I was kind of at a point where, like, okay, I just accept the fact that there are a lot of things I'm not going to understand,
right? But
with Elden Ring, I'm like, okay, now I know there is an answer somewhere.
Right.
If we think long enough about it, if we come at it from the right, you know, perspective, we can get close to what was the original design.
Yes.
And I think it's worked out so well to where, like, even now, you know, even if we didn't have the DLC, we'd still be having conversations like this.
Dude,
you know?
yeah, without a doubt, man. Yeah, and yeah, just to kind of hammer home that point too, just even more. It's absolutely insane. And now, knowing what we know, that this is effectively this, like, a second half of the story, the fact that Miyazaki and the team were able to realize that and be like, oh my god, we have more than we can actually fit into the base game here. So we actually have to, you know, build that other half later on down the line, because they were even able to recognize that there is so much to explore here in combination with our open-ended storytelling style as well, you know? And that just the prowess to be able to recognize that alone just speaks volumes about From Software and the way they go about telling their stories baseline, right? But yeah, dude, I just wanted to get that out there first and foremost, because I love this, dude. Thank you so much for coming on once again.
I was
dude.
literally having the same conversation with my brother last night after this. We watched the trailer and we were just like, dude, there's nothing else, man. Nothing else even comes close to this.
Straight up.
So cool. It's so just, like, deep, man.
Well, dude, it's funny that you say that too, because I was dissecting the trailer with my brother too the other night, and we were coming up with all crackpot theories and shit, dude. So yeah, man, it's absolutely mind-boggling. But back to where we were at. I forget exactly the last thing that we were talking about, but I think maybe we were on. Do you recall offhand?
We were talking about, I remember talking about the Nox and all that, but we went somewhere after that.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
I'm good to go wherever.
Yeah. So, I guess let's because I didn't really ask what your takeaway was on the initial scene with like what she's reaching into. You know what I mean? Like, who could that potentially be?
I think, and I still kind of think, even though I've had a lot of people disagree with me after I made my video, that it looks like a pregnant woman laying backwards and then her kind of reaching into the belly.
Right.
I mean, even if because you look at it closely, you're like, okay, well, what is going on here? There's no clear
right.
details if that's what it is, but everyone's kind of saying like, okay, this is like birth imagery. Or that's what it evokes. Like,
of course, yeah.
Why do we think that? Even because there's no clear details, but everyone kind of thinks. So I'm under the impression that that's what it is.
Okay. And as to who that,
seduction affair, that could be very well be literal, to where she's talking about America seducing and having an affair with a man, someone else, and then betraying, stealing a baby, and we have that painting later on in the gameplay trailer of an old man and a pregnant woman.
Oh, dude.
And so I'm kind of thinking that maybe that's that woman that she's stealing whatever that was from. Because the other scene of the man in the gameplay trailer has that big golden spike that's very similar to the skeletal structure of the Elden Beast.
Yes.
So maybe he was once a bearer of that power, that, you know, the golden threads that we see, that ancient primal power. I think it's the Crucible.
Yes.
But you also see Marika take those threads from the belly.
Yeah.
Which would have been that power being passed down to the next generation. And then she holds it up and it's trying to like break free, but she's holding it together and creating order.
Yeah.
I think the word order is very intentional there, because the Crucible is chaos.
Yes, exactly.
So she created order out of the chaos. She created the Elden Ring and its order out of the Crucible.
Yeah.
That's what I get from it.
Yeah, shaping and forming that chaos, that's a very that's a theme that From Software has loved to play around with in the past too, and obviously the reinforcing.
Elden Ring breaks, right? Whenever you shatter it, that's when those threads appear. They're destroying the order. It's the chaos. It's the order leaving and the chaos coming back.
Exactly, man. Exactly, dude. I really like that theory. Because dude, that was one of the most fascinating parts of the gameplay reveal trailer, barring, you know, like getting into the actual like gameplay related stuff, was like, from strictly a lore perspective, that individual, that old man and that woman. Because that's, I'd actually like to take a look back at her outfit there, and is it similar in color scheme?
I couldn't find it like any particularly exact details. Okay, so because the robe that she's wearing is very dark, right? Yeah,
if I remember right in the portrait.
Really smudged. And I think that painting is edited quite a bit.
Yeah,
we had this happen before with the original Elden Ring gameplay trailer.
I remember. Yeah,
Rykard's painting was edited.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, they edit that because they don't want to potentially give too much away. You know, I could definitely see them doing something like that, because obviously what you stated too. You know what my relation here, because you brought up that woman. This kind of runs in opposition to what you were just saying with that theory, but could that same woman be the woman that we see kneeling down in the burning city, holding that weapon of some sort?
Man, it could.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I believe we see I forget what color her hair is in the cinematic
I
trailer.
think it's just hard to tell. I
Okay,
think it has
okay,
an
yeah, that's fair. It might not.
exact color, but dude, I
Yeah,
want I want that to be Melina so bad. I
dude.
want more lore there
Yeah,
so
honestly,
bad.
because the fire symbolism and all of that on the cloak,
Yeah.
flapping in the wind and all of that burned and bodiless once again, that direct correlation there.
Well, and we got like so much imagery of that could pertain to the Godskins,
Dude,
and maybe the
exactly.
Godskin hunts happened.
Yes, dude. See, and here's the other part, I guess, of this, because I'm sure you've been prompted with the theory by now of that whatever America's putting her hand into and tearing that energy out could potentially be the Glomide Queen, maybe.
Yeah.
And just kind of using that as a foundation, I find it very interesting because we already established earlier in the cast that the Divine Towers are potentially linked to keeping the Realm of Shadow hidden, right? Because there's a lot of direct correlation there with 6 Divine Towers, 6 Baldicans, all of that, America's Mischief, etc., right?
So before we move on,
Yeah, of course.
I hope I don't sidetrack you with this, but
Yeah, no.
the architecture of the Queen's bedchamber is different than everything else in Landell. It's very unique.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an edit back when we got the first image for the DLC trailer of a lot of the ruins we can find, and they share almost the exact same like facade.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. That's fascinating as hell.
Yeah, I'll have to send that to you after I got a picture of it together.
Yeah, no, that's very, very fascinating. On that point, before I get back to where I was, throughout the war scene of the siege of the city by Mesmer, a lot of, like, I was talking to a good friend of mine last night, and he recognized that there was a lot of similarities between not that place that they're attacking is Landell, because it's clearly not, and we can see that city that's being ransacked at different points throughout the gameplay reveal trailer too. Obviously, the key feature being the far off, high up, raised pillars that have that shadow raising off of them, right? And that's obviously the same city that is being attacked in the story trailer, because we can clearly see that when it pans up to the shadow tree itself, and we'll have to talk about that imagery too a little bit later, but because that's incredibly fascinating to me. But yeah, my friend pointed out that there's a lot of architectural similarities between what we see in the city itself and Landell too, which is very, very interesting, considering that obviously Marika would have been privy, she would have traversed all of these places, after she got to this place in the first place, and after she walled this off, potentially used very, very similar architecture to what was already raised by the natives when she first arrived, right?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I don't know how much of that I buy.
Okay.
Because when I look at it personally, I see more of Ferrum.
Yeah, it is very like old too. Like the main correlation is the rounded rooftops and things like that, and also that is very, very Farum Azula as well.
See that in Landell as well.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's once again, there's a lot of correlation there. Definitely that city that we see being ransacked in the story trailer by Mesmer it looks extremely old. Even when you're like getting the close-ups of it and certain shots in the gameplay reveal trailer, it looks extremely like archaic, right? Like it can be equated to a lot of extremely old architecture in our own history, humankind, right? And obviously From Software is very, very intentional with the things that they take inspiration from, and they take a lot of inspiration from things that are actually exist in the real world, and I definitely agree with you on that point. I just thought it was really fascinating that there are some pretty drastic similarities in that within the actual inner parts of the city. And what my friend also presented as well was that it seems like the like outer wall of that city is like way older architecture than like anything inside too, it seems to be, which is
I was kind of looking at that
yeah,
because the doors on the front too remind me of like those carvings we see in Mogwin Palace.
Yes, dude, exactly.
The ancient culture that was done away with.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a great correlation too. And so, and once again, that is a very real thing that did happen throughout our history as well, where you have cities that were effectively like razed to the ground and then built up again upon themselves multiple times over and over again throughout history.
Yeah.
Which that could be what's happening here with what we're seeing in that, right? And clearly it's being destroyed, razed to the ground, like I said, and we say it won't be built up again in the future, dude. But yeah, so that entire city, and I guess let's hone in on that, dude. The Mesmer scene in the war there. What's your kind of takeaway on that?
I think I don't know how much of this is really much of a contentious question, but yeah. I think it's very clearly like Mesmer's army attacking the natives of the Land of Shadow. The natives are all represented by omen horns and crucible aspects, things that are seen by, I guess, Radagon's reign as, less than themselves. I can't think of a better word.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying though. Yep.
Kind of like done away with, shunned, and
yes, exactly.
And so if Mesmer also thinks that, then, well, may not think, but may have been ordered to.
Right. Yeah. More likely. Yeah.
Once again, propagandizes the civilization to think if they ever came to find out that this war happened, okay, well, it's justified because these are less than ourselves. It was a righteous purification.
Right. Exactly.
That's kind of what my thoughts go to there.
Yeah, no, I had a very similar takeaway as well, I think, because I really like that idea, once again, that potentially the Realm of Shadow was sected off from the rest of the Lands Between, and it was a full, whole piece at one point, potentially when Marika and the Newman came there from outside the Lands Between, actually, right? And obviously, once again, for, her lust for power, everything, as to how she actually was able to overthrow. See, that's the weird part to me right there. Okay. So if you kind of look at it like that, and if the events of this in what came to be the Realm of Shadow, what was the timeline there? Because like, who did she shack up with to actually gain that power? Because in my mind, her shacking up with Godfrey came after she sected this off and walled it off, and it became the Realm of Shadow, right? So like, how would she? Well, and here's the other part too, because this wasn't explicitly stated. This was just like a very poorly Google translated interview, where people took this to mean that Mesmer was a child of Marika, right?
Yeah, and that's a whole thing too.
Yeah, and we don't know. I think it's better to err on the side of caution in relation to that. So I won't outright explicitly say that Mesmer is a child of Marika.
Well, I think the evidence points to it, right?
I think
looks like Radagon.
I agree. I agree.
He is fighting against the forces that would rise to oppose Marika's order.
Right. And once again,
the statue behind him has Marika's bracelets.
Yes, right. Yes, and of course the line, "Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction?"
But you're absolutely right. Though. He never confirmed it.
Right. So yeah, going off of that, just erring on the side of caution because I don't want to outright say it, or assume it. Right. Even though a lot of evidence points towards it. So. And this kind of leads back into my overall theory that I didn't really get to go into earlier, and I guess I'll lay it out now. So with what I established earlier, you know, the Leonine Misbegotten having the trait of red hair being directly associated with manifestations of the Crucible, you know, being known as in the code, you know, as Children of Radagon, the baseline Misbegotten, right? And also red hair being directly associated also with giants. Giants could potentially, you could use that as a jump to assume that giants were as a direct manifestation of the primordial crucible of life as well. That is a jump nonetheless, but I think it's a pretty seamless one in my opinion. So laying those foundations there, okay. This is my overall theory as to Radagon actually being a separate individual, okay, from Marika in its entirety, and he potentially helped Marika rise to power, okay, when she arrived in this plane. So my theory as to this is Radagon, in the Giant's Red Braid description, states that Radagon always reviled his red hair, his origins, okay? And whether that's directly talking about the Crucible itself, it could very well be, or, and this is my crackpot theory here, dude, Radagon could potentially be a pygmy fire giant. And
I've heard that before.
Okay.
I'm not, dude, Radagon again. That's like so much we don't know. And
I know.
It confuses me so bad.
It's a lot of assuming happening here, but that's the beauty of, you know, being prompted with something new like this, right? Because the sky's the limit, and we can throw all of the speculation out there, and you know, who cares? You know, what ends up being right, what ends up being wrong. But so, going off of that, if Radagon was a pygmy fire giant, and he was effectively looked down upon by his own kin, and if that was the reason why he always reviled his origins, effectively, because he was looked down upon, he was the pygmy fire giant, all of that, right? And that's interesting to me too, because as far as we know, if once again, what came to be the Realm of Shadow was connected with the larger part of the Lands Between, we know that the Fire Giants would have also been a key player in the power level overall. And you already stated too that on the giant war machine cauldron things, right, that we see in the story trailer and the gameplay reveal trailer, specifically the gameplay one though, you can see a giant's head with red hair attached to its like belt area, right on the front of its thigh, I think is where it resides precisely. But so that's interesting for one, because that kind of reinforces the idea that the giants were potentially aligned with the natives, because once again we have this reoccurring theme in the DLC proper that, like, all throughout the gameplay reveal trailer, we see all sorts of these weird and wacky, crazy enemy designs and things like that, and creatures, right? That, like, you know, the hippo porcupine thing, right? It uses an aspect of the Crucible incantation, it looks like, you know, very, very similar, right? So, like, you have all of these creatures, you have the Omen Horn individual, you know, lion things, right? Like, the Omen Horns are a key deciding factor, or reinforcing, you know, theme throughout. Two, implying, and I think you said this before, but that the natives are somehow associated and directly as a result of potentially the primordial crucible of life, and the crucible was actually something to like respect and was like worshipped effectively, potentially originally by this native faction, right? It definitely seems like that from what we know now.
Well, let me present you with this too.
Okay. Yep.
A completely different theory.
Okay.
Not to
no, dude. No, go for it. It's all good.
But Placidusax, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought this up, dude.
Have been an Elden Lord.
Yes.
But if what we see at the beginning of the trailer is Marika actually forming the runes themselves, maybe he was never an Elden Lord per se, but rather a lord of this power of the Crucible.
Exactly, man.
From a time way back.
Yes. And dude,
It's like, well, how was he an Elden Lord if Godfrey was the first Elden Lord? You know?
Right, dude, exactly. And that kind of speaks to. See, dude, I love that you brought this up, dude. This is so good. We're very much on the same page here with this. Like, yeah, Placidusax is extremely fascinating, and I want to point out too that Placidusax in the lore, I believe it's explicitly stated that he flees to Missoula beyond time.
I think it said that his god flees and he's waiting for it in the.
Okay. See, that's even more interesting, actually. Okay. And also, I will point out, but just even to reinforce this more, is that 2 of his 4 heads are cut off too. Yep. He looks very war-torn and battle-ridden. Like, you know, he was potentially fighting off some opposing faction. Okay. And we don't necessarily, and I don't want to jump to the conclusion that was Mesmer by any means, of course, but there's a potential of that being the case, or the fact that something has attacked in the age before even what we're seeing and the natives of the Realm of Shadow that we currently see, you know, from what we've seen in both trailers too. Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but aren't the dragons referred to as being like everlasting in Elden Ring lore, much the same as they were in like Dark Souls lore? Or is that not the case? Okay, because
I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't recall either, but I remember something like a very drastic similarity in that, I think.
Bro, if that is the case, somebody brought up a really crazy theory to me.
Okay. Dude, let's hear it.
Grand Sax in Leyndell.
Yeah.
The posture that he makes there, it doesn't look like he's dead. It just looks like he's frozen, like almost like he's frozen in time.
Oh, dude, that could be wild.
Ever since somebody brought that up to me, I'm like, wait, yeah, it kind of does look like that. His head's like curled and pointed upwards.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, dude. That is, dude. Yeah, and the man, I'm so glad we're getting onto the dragon aspect too, because it seems like Mesmer
I'm
has.
about to reach the edge of my knowledge with this.
Okay, I gotcha. But regardless of that, dude, like Mesmer also has what they look very similar to what the player can acquire with Dragon Communion in the base game too. So, and the fact that snakes are referred to as being imperfect dragons. Right,
well, and the fact that his snake has wings.
I know, right? Exactly, too. So, like, it really seems to point to the fact that Mesmer has some association with dragons in some capacity. I don't know for sure yet, but there's a lot of contributing factors and reinforcement there to point towards that being the case, and that is extremely fascinating too. And dude, this is a meme, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway, dude. Radagon's name is an anagram for a dragon. Just throwing that out there, dude. Take it and run with it.
But to make of all that, honestly.
Yeah, dude. I know. Like the dragons are such a huge mystery, dude. And even beyond that, like
the altar of Dragon Communion is decorated with the faces of lions too. So that could be something even older, you know.
Well, dude, you know what that directly coincides with, and I was going to get to this point too, in my overall theory, was that I don't believe it states this in the game anymore, and this was pre-release lore, but if I'm remembering correctly, the dragons were also allied with the giants, as well as the beastmen, okay? And I believe I'm remembering that correctly from the pre-release lore. I don't remember precisely what item description that was on, but
it sounds familiar, but I can't recall it.
Yeah, so like I want to preface that by saying that like I could be completely and totally wrong on that. I need to go back and look through a lot of the pre-release lore if I can still find it. I don't know if it's compiled anywhere, but especially, and once again, just to kind of bounce off that once again, reassessing all of that, if it is compiled in some location, dude, please do let me know, and if you happen across it, because
I used to have a document a long time ago.
Okay.
Checked it ever since the game came out.
Yeah, I got you, because like all of that, based on what we said prior in the cast 2 about a lot of that being significantly changed from what we ended up getting in the base game, a lot of that could potentially come into play now in the DLC, because that's where a lot of that, they could have taken a lot of those themes and ideas, and they may end up resurfacing.
When the game came out, because I was so deep in TNT lore.
Dude, same, dude. Same.
I was making theories at the beginning, and I was like, wait, where did I remember this from? Like, wait, this is totally wrong.
Dude, exactly, bro. So it's like, there's definite value in going back and looking at all of those things under this new lens of what all of the new information that we have now. Even going back and looking at, you know, like the release story trailer and the 2019 story trailer, even, you know, like me and my brother were looking back at those under the new perspective that we have, based on the information. And it's just like, man, they're dropping some really subtle but massive hints here, dude. You know what I mean? Like, ever since the beginning, which is just absolutely wild, man.
Well, I think going back to the like 1.0 and CNT lore and all that, you know, we can't take it as fact anymore.
Of course.
I think it's a great tool for looking at like
exactly
what
dude.
Their intentions were.
Yes, right? Dude, right. Yeah, because
same thing with content.
Yeah, 100%, dude. It's by no means like gospel by any means, right? Like, definitely take it with a grain of salt. But these ideas were cut for a reason. But typically, when people say that, it's like, oh, it's just because it didn't, you know, like they hated it or something like that. You know, that's always the assumption. But it's like, hold on, you know, like, no, back up here. There's another potentiality here because the DLC's scale is so large, right? So, yeah, no, it's extremely fascinating, and I'm definitely gonna go back and start researching and trying to find a lot of that stuff. But kind of going,
I know some people that have that document.
Oh, dude, definitely send that my way.
I'll try to get it to you.
Yeah, for sure, I would appreciate that. Just to kind of round out that theory that I had though, with Radagon like potentially being a pygmy fire giant. So under that basis, if he was ridiculed and like hated by his own kind of like the odd one out kind of thing, right? And Marika arrives to the Lands Between before she sects that piece off into the Realm of Shadow. It stands to me, like we established, that Godfrey could, you know, like it seems pretty clear to me that the stuff that happened in what became the Realm of Shadow did come first. But once again, we could be completely off base with that, but everything that we've seen points to that being the case. So once again, you know, I prompt that question. It's like, who did she like ally with to potentially create Mesmer in the first place, right? 2, and once again, Mesmer has all of those themes. He has the red hair, all of that stuff, right? And before Marika accepts the power of the greater will or anything, because that's the whole running theory, right? That is what awakens Radagon in her, right? So,
well, let me present something else real quick.
Yeah.
A theory that a lot of people have been sending to me after that trailer.
Okay.
Is what if that's referring to her form of Radagon seducing potentially the gloam-eyed queen?
Oh, wow.
And a few reasons of why that could be the case is, well, number one, Radagon did that to Renala, which many people think was Marika's intention, since the children there were demigods. But, you know, first off, the Godskin nobles have snake features as well.
Yes, they do.
Which Mesmer could have had. Mesmer, I mean, looks almost like the same skeleton or body of a Godskin apostle.
Mm-hmm. He's very similar. Yes.
Features,
yeah.
And so that kind of raises the question again, like, was Radagon Marika always like that.
Yeah, and that would imply that, you know, obviously this Newman race was incredibly powerful even before they came here. So
one other thing too,
yeah,
building off that,
yeah,
you know, Fia is able to birth a rune
right,
after laying with
yep,
Godwin.
mm-hmm.
And so if there's an affair here, Radagon, even if he wasn't a god, he could still have potentially created what could end up being a rune for the power of one.
Wow, that is a really, really fascinating theory, and that aligns directly with the line, the seduction and betrayal. And once again, you know, that was a very, very primary theme with people assuming that that corpse would have been somebody in relation to the Godskins or the Glomide Queen herself. And then we see, you know, like, yeah, so man, that is really, really fascinating, dude. I actually really, really like that a lot.
The only hole I have with that at the moment is where it talks about Shadow being born. And then we have the part that the Glomide Queen was defeated by Malekith.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Shadow. Yeah.
So, you know, where does that play in as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Another part of it.
Right, and man, I keep going to just thing after thing after thing, dude. I keep making these connections because it's like, just a small anecdote here, but after the gameplay trailer dropped, the Godfrey's cutscene, you know, because he was bestowed Sarash, right? And he's in that like ethereal phantom form when he's on his back in the first phase. And then in the second phase, he starts slowly phasing into this realm, implying that he resides somewhere else. And I think there's a lot of implications that the protectors of the Empyrean are referred to as being shadows, directly linking them to, you know, or correlating them to the realm of shadow potentially, where there's all of this beast and omen imagery. You see what I mean? So it's like Marika, Mesmer potentially overthrowing that native culture and then enslaving them to be their protectors. Right? That's a really interesting theory too, and I like that.
And I hope we get more on that, because Sarash is a part of the lore I don't even touch, man. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what's going on there, because we don't see it happen anywhere else.
Yeah, dude, exactly. Right. Like, and man, it's such a big question mark, but obviously, you know, like the lion dancers and things like that, you know, and the triple-headed lion statues in that that capital that we see being ransacked and just destroyed by Mesmer, you know, like a lot of the close-up shots that we can see, there's a lot of that imagery. And also one thing that I wanted to point out overall with the architecture of that particular place is tons of spiral column imagery too, which is insanely fascinating to me into what that actually may shape up to mean. And obviously there's also so much interweaving and duality being a theme, you know, all throughout. And just the spiral design is a very, very prevalent thing all throughout the game in general. So
a double helix.
Yeah, a lot of that stemming from potentially the realm of shadow once again, right? But yeah, dude, no, like that's my overall theory, I guess, to kind of wrap it up with a neat bow, is that potentially Radagon could have been a pygmy fire giant. Marika shacks up with him, reinforcing and fueling his hatred towards his own kind, because, you know, once again, reviled, looked down upon, all of that, and essentially helping her overthrow and having that child, Mesmer, to help her overthrow the native faction and all of that too. Because here's the other part of it too, is that the seduction and betrayal could also be in direct reference of that too, with this theory, right? Because Radagon would be seduced by Marika and betraying his own kind, and not only the fire giants, but the overall crucible, You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's an I don't know how much, you know, like water that holds, but I think it's a very, very compelling theory nonetheless. But
Yeah, that gives a lot of reason for what happens, for sure.
yeah, dude. So I think it's something that should definitely be explored, and it's an important perspective to keep in mind as we learn more and more as we go on down the line. But with that, dude, I suppose we can start wrapping up here, dude. But I did want to just once again thank you, dude, for coming out and chatting with the ye ol' Frost, man, dude. I really do appreciate it, and I had
a great conversation.
Yeah, dude. I can talk about lore literally until the ends of the earth.
We can go on forever, dude.
Yeah. So no, I really do appreciate that, man. And once again, it seems like the embargo is lifting potentially next week for the demo that a lot of content creators got to play recently.
What makes you think next week?
So, I follow. Well, once again, and you brought this up in your video a while back. You know, Emmy talking about they're doing that, right? And that was last week. And traditionally, when they do this, and when they've done it in the past, it's always the not the following week, but the week after for the embargo to lift. It's about a 2-week period. And also, there's a channel that I follow, Skill Up. I would highly recommend it. It's all about gaming news and stuff and what's going on in the industry. And he mentioned that in his video today that he'll be able to talk about where he was flown out to last week, this coming week, right after the weekend. So I think that points towards the embargo lifting there. So it's going to be a very, very, very exciting couple of weeks here, dude. And obviously,
do I want to watch it? Do I not? I don't know.
Yeah, I know, right, dude? I'm very much in the same boat on that, dude. But exciting things await nonetheless, dude. And we're under a month away, dude. I am so hyped, bro.
I just wish I could snap my fingers and be there. I'm overwhelmed with all the new information and all this.
Yep.
Let's just get into it now. You know,
yeah, exactly,
don't need anything
dude.
else. Let's go. We're ready.
Yeah, 100%, my man. Well, with all that said, dude, thank you again, and
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, dude, I'll potentially catch you again in the future, my man. Bye for now.